Hello, I'm Fay.
And I'm Becky. In this podcast, we're going to be talking about maximising your potential as a leader and living your best life personally and professionally.
So join us on the M53 for our weekly chats, full of insights and inspiration, and of course, a cuppa and a butty.
Fay, it's called a brew.
Hello and welcome to our first ever episode of
Yay!
Morning, Becky.
Good morning.
So today, what we thought we'd do to start off with is just tell you a little bit about ourselves, why we're here chatting on this podcast, why we've set it up, and, a little bit more about who we are and what we will bring to this podcast.
Okay, Fay, let's start with you then. So tell us a little bit more about your background.
Okay, so I've been working in this arena since 1998, so that feels quite a long time. But
it is a long time.
It's a long time. I was clearly very, very young. But yeah, working with businesses I worked for a long time with investors in people. So I worked as an advisor. So it's helping businesses to meet the investors in people national standard. But basically what that was a framework of good practice. And it looked at the organization from the leadership, from the management, and from an individual level. And so a lot of my work was working with the leaders and helping them to implement the standard from sort of their commitment to it, and looking and helping them to put lots of things in place that were in line with the standard through their organisation. So it looked at training and development, making sure that people had equal opportunities to develop, but it was always in line with their aims and objectives for the organisation. And there was always lots to do in terms of leadership team, middle management team, and bringing people on board. Quite often it was a big culture shift. And
I can imagine. Yeah.
Massive culture shifts for lots of businesses. And from then, I worked with leadership and management. We worked with helping businesses recruit and select, and with work-life balance, putting policies in place for that. And then I moved into the government wrote a white paper looking at the skills of directors and basing it on the fact that lots of directors are in that position because they're great at what they do, but actually they hadn't got any director level development, and there was a massive gap. You've seen it as well. Massive gap there. So we had funding to help to fill that gap a little bit. But it's important to me. I've been working in that arena for a long time, and I see, even as a business owner and working with small business owners now as well as larger organizations, that, as business owners, we set up our business because we're really good at what we do, but we don't necessarily have the skills to run a business. And I see that then broadened out in larger organizations is we're in a leadership position because we're great at what we do, but we might not necessarily have the skills to lead well and as well as we might like to. So it's looking at that area.
Fantastic. And so now you have Fay Rebekah Coaching.
I do. So Fay Rebekah Coaching is 3 years old. I did have another business before that I set up after 5 years of being a mum. I was made redundant back in 2011. I was on maternity leave, and basically we had the government change in 2010. So David Cameron and Nick Clegg came into power, formed the coalition. We'd had years of a Labour government before that, and Business Link was actually a Labour baby. So when David Cameron and Nick Clegg came into power, they were like, "Oh, we need to change this up. We don't want all these bodies that Labour set up." So they did change it. Business Link, I believe, now is a national organisation, as opposed to being regional and sub-regional based as it was when I worked with them. So I was made redundant, and I'd been there. Well, I'd actually been there since 1996, so it was a good long while. I used the time to be a mum for a while, and then when Sam, my little boy, started school, I decided to set up a business. I set up my first business, which was business support it didn't really light my fire. I wanted to get back into looking at personal development, business development. So
Yes.
I changed it 2 years in. So Fay Rebekah Coaching has been around for 3 years, and never looked back.
Never looked back.
Never
Fantastic.
looked back.
Yeah.
And how about you, Becky? What do you do, and why do you do what you do?
So my background very different from yours. I worked in engineering. So I was a mechanical engineer for 15 years. I worked in the building services sector, as it's known, which is sort of a branch within construction. And I worked, all around the country, actually. On various different projects, from building schools and universities to transferring over to our rail division. And I got to go and have some fun on the railways, and I was part of the Crossrail team at Farringdon Station.
Oh, wow.
Which then incorporated the new Elizabeth line, years of fun in engineering and in construction. But like you, my business has now been set up on the back of redundancy. I took voluntary redundancy after 15 years with the same company as well. I was very loyal. 15 years with the same company. I took voluntary redundancy after COVID hit. And all the mess that went on there.
Yeah.
I retrained. I did a coaching diploma, and I've now set up Quest for Rest, which is all about, I do leadership coaching and personal and professional development. And sort of the leadership development has always been a real interest of mine. From the background that I was in, leadership was not always the strong point of many of those that I worked with. And so I now want to do what I can to change that up. It felt like there was very little that I could do on the inside. So I'm giving it a new approach. I'm seeing what I can do from hitting it from the outside.
Wow.
So here I am.
So here you are. And tell me a bit more about Quest for Est, because when I first heard what your business was called, I was like, what? What's this? So what's Quest for Est?
Yeah, do you know, we may have to do like the full story behind Quest for Rest another day, because it's a bit of a long one. But the short version is, it is all about becoming the happiest version of you. Okay, so letting go of all the wrong ests that we might chase after in life. So to be the best at something, or to be the strongest, the fastest, the funniest, chasing after these things because we think that they're really important, but actually in doing so, we lose sight of ourselves. And so it's all about this quest for letting go of the rest in order to become the happiest. And that is what I want for leaders. I want leaders who are, really self-aware. They're emotionally secure. They are the happiest version of themselves, which then allows them to lead their team really well and really effectively.
I love that. I love it because I've seen it. I've seen that side of leadership, and I've seen the other side of leadership as well. And actually the side where we let go of our est is, we don't see it very often. I've been really, really fortunate, and maybe this is another episode as well, to when you're working in a team that is led really well, and the difference when you then are plunged into a team that's perhaps not quite led so well. being diplomatic. But I do love that, and that is what it's all about, isn't it? And when we do strive for the ests, and it's quite a brave thing to let go of them.
And focus. And do you know what? If being one of those ests is what actually drives you and makes you happy, then do you know what? That's okay. But if you're purely doing it from a competition point of view, or from an insecurity point of view, if that's the place that it comes from, then that's not going to serve you so well, So what is actually important there? What is actually going to make you the happiest version of you? And it's interesting, Faye, that you just said about, you've seen this in action. You've seen teams that have been led really well, and that informs the way that you approach your business now, right?
Definitely. Because I've seen it. I've worked in a team that worked really well. I've worked in an organization that was led very well. And the team that I was in was really strong, really had great leadership. But also I've seen it with my clients because we were turning things around. We were changing cultures, changing the ethos of the organization. And for me, and where I come from with the work that I do, is I want to work with those senior people, either the business owner or they're the senior team. And I want to see that commitment. I want to see their commitment to changing the ethos within their place of work, to bring their people on board. If they've got people, I also work with smaller organizations who are literally owner managers. But if they've got people, they're bringing their people on board. They're all going in that same direction. They're all pulling together to get to those end results. And they know exactly what they're doing, why they turn up to work every day. And this fits in really well with what you do with Happiest. You've got to be a happy self to take your whole self to work every day.
Absolutely. Yeah. And this is then where you and I approach things differently. We work on opposite ends of the scale. So I work with the future, the aspiring and the emerging leaders. And that's for me because I'm certainly not going to sort of sit here and say I've never seen great leadership in action. I have seen great leadership in action. But I think it is so few and far between. And my experience instead is what happens that I think the sort of the top level talk the talk. Some of them walk the walk, but not so many. But then as you sort of filter down through the organisation, those behaviours that are not so desirable become more and more common. And so what I saw then was for those people moving into that leadership position, that was the only thing that they had modelled. People who were really more managers than leaders. And I think there's a really important differentiation there between leaders and managers and what leading and managing is. I don't know about you, but the way that I sort of look at it is that you manage things, but you lead people.
Yes.
And people, they get into a management role and they don't actually know how to be a leader. And so instead, I'm kind of playing the long game. I'm starting with those who are at the bottom, who are one day going to be at the top, because I want them to know that they can be and do better than those people above them, than those people who maybe haven't actually been trained to be leaders. And so by starting them young in their career, I should say, because actually their age doesn't really have anything to do with this. You can have these emerging leaders who are knocking on in years,
of course,
but not necessarily, they've not been in that leadership position yet. And so starting them early in that leadership development so that they get that time and that space to change up their thinking, to learn better ways, to find out more about themselves. And something that I talk about a lot, I think I need to change my branding to include onions, because I talk about I talk about onions a lot. Because what I see is that traditional leadership development then, not only does it focus on when you're already in a leadership position, which by that point you've probably been doing it a little while and maybe haven't been doing it quite so well because no one's actually told you what it is that you need to do as a leader. But what traditional leadership development focuses on is these outer layers of the onion. So those skills that are visible to the outside world. So I don't know, how you delegate or how you manage time, or it might tell you about, processes for if there's disagreements or discord within your team. And that's great. But the place to start is the middle of the onion. And that is right at the heart of you as a person. Because if you haven't done that inner work, that work that says, actually, do you know what? I'm really comfortable with who I am as a person, with where I'm at, with what I'm about and what I can do and what I can bring to this team, and the growth that I need in order to be able to be really solid as a leader. If you haven't done all that, then those outer skills, they're not so great. And it shows that you haven't done it. You can't learn to delegate to someone if you're really insecure about delegating, about not trusting other people, about not, about perfectionism. So you have to start at the inside of the onion. And so that is then where I start as well. So with those people who are one day going to be at the top, we're playing the long game, and we're starting right at the core of them as a person.
That's beautiful, isn't it? I love that. It fits in again with what I'm doing with my clients. We're looking at those leadership behaviors, those qualities, those traits, and probably because we're both coaches, it is about coaching the person, not the problem or the issue or the role. It's definitely the person. And I suppose this fits in with that sort of old age saying that, you can train your managers, but your leaders are born. And maybe they are, but we can develop, we can completely change as people once we become self-aware or more aware of ourselves. And especially I think when we see good leadership, we can see, we can model ourselves, and we do this as human beings. We model ourselves on other people. You see those behaviors that you like, that you desire, that you want for yourself. And that's all part of the self-awareness journey.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, with the whole leaders are born, and I'm not sure I would agree. I could, because, and I know you said anyone can develop it, but for me, leadership is a skill. It's a set of skills. It's a set of many skills. Yeah. And like any other skill, it can be grown, it can be developed. I had a funny chat with a neighbour and friend of mine who I was talking about this, and I was talking about empathy, for example, is a really important skill to have as a leader. And he said, "Oh, I'm no good at empathy. I'm no good at that." I said, "But it's a skill, and it's a skill that you can learn." He was like, "I'm not so sure." Well, he used to be a really good rugby player, and I said, "Well, at one point in your life, you couldn't play rugby. It was a skill. That was, again, another set of skills that you developed." And leadership skills are no different. They are attainable for everyone.
They absolutely are. I do agree with that. And I think it's a case of if I'm not that good at empathy, that's the story you're telling yourself. So you will believe that because that's the story you're telling yourself. But again, maybe that's a podcast for another day.
Yeah, the stories that we are telling ourselves. Yeah, goodness me, absolutely. I think that's and that's our coach hat's on as well there, isn't it? That will happen a lot, but that is what we do, and that is what we are knowledgeable in, that is what we are trained in, and that is why we then work with these people.
Absolutely. So why, Becky, why have we come together to do this podcast?
I don't know, Faye. Why have we? Faye, do you know, interestingly, Faye and I have never actually met in the flesh. We met on our coach training, and as it was during the pandemic, everything was online. And I think it's probably safe to say we clicked. We found that we have a good synergy around the way that we work, but also the fact that we approach things from a different angle. I hope that will help to bring more people into this podcast who maybe hadn't thought of it from the other side of the coin, whether they think about it's important to start at the bottom or at the top, and to find those sort of two perspectives on this same topic of leadership. Yeah.
And I think we're going to have some great topics and some great guests who will bring their perspective as well. It's really very exciting. I'm just going to say a little bit about why we're meeting on the M53. So Becky, you can probably hear from the way Becky speaks, but Becky's from the north. So you're from a place called Rossendale, aren't you, Becky?
I mean, I'm not from here, Faye, but
I'm
it's
so
where
sorry.
I now. I can't believe.
I can't believe I've just made that major faux pas.
And you'll understand now why this is a faux pas. My mum and dad will be listening to this, Faye. My dad will be cringing. I can hear it now. I'm
Becky's
from
dad,
Leeds.
I am so sorry. Becky is from Leeds.
I'm from Leeds. I am from God's own country, but I now live on the wrong side of the Pennines.
Oh my goodness.
I am now in Lancashire.
I get it.
In a place called Rossendale.
And I'm further south, and that's why I don't understand about all this Leeds-Rossendale Pennine divide.
The War of the Roses, Faye.
Of course. And you know what? I love history, and I've read all about the War of the Roses. I do get it, really. So I'm from a little town called Shifnal, which is in Shropshire, and Becky, we were looking at the map and saying, well, where could we meet? And Becky said the M53. And I don't think I'd go on the M53 at all to see Becky. I'm sure I'd be shooting up the M6. However, it kind of rhymed with meet me on the M53.
Yeah. Well, according to whatever website it was that I used to find a halfway point between us, it was some random place on the M53. So here we are. We are meeting on the M53.
And we will do this in person one day.
Probably
one day soon. We will go to the M53. But it's a great halfway point, and it's a great title for a podcast.
I mean, does it get any better, Faye?
It doesn't.
I mean, maybe it does, but it's going to work.
Absolutely. And on that note, we'll say goodbye for our first episode, but we just wanted to let you know a little bit more about us, why we're chatting about leadership, and what you can expect really from the podcast.
See you again soon.
Thank you for listening to Meet Me on the M53. If you'd like to know more, you can see Becky at questforest.co.uk and Faye at fayblakey.com.
Don't forget to subscribe so that you don't miss an episode, and thank you to Wahhoo Media for our production. We'll see you next time on the M53.
Safe travels.